So let's just chant Om 3 times. Breathing in. Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Ganeshaya Namaha. So today we are coming to Ravana himself, coming to the battle, the final battle. Doesn't get over quite so quickly, but in any case, after he saw that all his people were killed, all his favorite son Indrajit, his Kumbhakarna, his brother, all the brave people in um, Lanka were killed, he started feeling a bit anxious. So Mandodari tells him, that why don't you at least now give back Sita and make friends with Rama? Let's forget this whole thing. And because it doesn't look like Rama is an ordinary person, you let us not take it for granted. So Rama says to Sita, to Mandodari, he says, I've been thinking the same thing. Not that giving back Sita, but there's something about Rama. He is not an ordinary person. I have a feeling he is the Mahavishnu that I knew I will come to my death with. But then, having come so far, there are two things. He said, one thing is, having come so far, I can't go and say I'm sorry and give the wife back to the man because that's not my character, it's not my Swadharma. See, the other day I was reading about Swadharma. I was told by Swadharma about Swadharma. Everybody's body and mind is designed in a very specific way to react in a very specific way to circumstances in each life um, life entry. Like, you have a birth and you're designed in a particular way, you react in that particular way, you finish a certain karma, learn from that karma, and then you go back. And when you come back, you're programmed yet another way because there's some other karma waiting to be handled, and you react only in that way. You can't blame yourself. And you can't blame somebody else also because that's the way they are, that's the way you are. You can't be different, they can't be different. Like somebody said, a lion can't behave like a stone can't behave like a lion. That's the way they are designed and programmed. So he says, Ravana says, having used to never ever bowing before anybody, I cannot now go and apologize to anybody. That's not in my character. You'll hear many people these days saying, that's not who I am. I can't be different. So that was one reason. The other thing is, he said, if I continue fighting, then at least I might die in the war and I might get moksha. But on the other hand, if I give up, then I'm sure Rama with his benevolence will give me the kingdom and I'll be stuck with this and this samsara and living with the grief of having lost so many people. And what's the point of living like that? So he thinks it's a better deal for him to continue to go into battle and to be fierce. And we all make these decisions at certain times in our lives. But when we go there, we forget the higher reason for why we are there. We are moved by our design. We behave, we react exactly the way we are programmed. So Ravana said this, and then he said, I'm going to go into battle now today. Live or die, either Rama will die or I will die. We'll both fight to the finish, he says. And then they say this war between Rama and Ravana was so unique. There was no war to compare with it except the Rama Ravana war itself. It was its own comparison. There was nothing else that could compare with it. The battle of Kurukshetra, where the Pandavas and Kauravas fought, was nothing in comparison to this. So when he went out, the chariot of his was rattling with such a noise like thunder because he was fully in form. And hearing that sound and knowing that this could be the final fight, the all nature, the Pancha Mahabhutas, they didn't know whether they were going to be annihilated because this was such a major war. And they knew both the rivals had mystic missiles, so they didn't know whether the whole universe could be wiped out in that fight. So the Pancha Mahabhutas were trembled. The earth, that is the mountains, shook. They say the oceans, because they were so agitated, the waves rose up as if it was trying to touch the sky. There was a roaring of the animals that were on the mountain. The air started blowing heavy winds like it was the end of the universe, that sort of thing. And the sky itself seemed to be coming down. So all these happened, and then Ravana drove furiously towards Rama because he had only one thing in mind: either I kill him or I get killed. So when he went like that, they say Rama was standing absolutely calm and firm on the ground, waiting for the battle, holding his bow. And when Ravana looked at him, it seemed as if Rama's bow would touch the skies. It didn't, but this was the feeling Ravana had. So you see, our perception always changes with what we are expecting in life. So then after that was done, they went towards each other. Rama had extraordinary energy, and so did Ravana. We have to remember Ravana was one of the bodyguards of Vishnu, that is Rama himself, Jaya and Vijaya. Rama came to liberate one of them, both of them in this lifetime. And Jaya and Vijaya, both of them agreed to hate Rama, as Vishnu completely. So they had to do their sadhana completely. There's no half-hearted hating. You've got to hate completely, or you get, the mind disturbs you. Either you love completely or you hate completely. So, and both of them, because these two had gone right up to be security guards, they were really very well, very competent, eligible to fight with each other. They were on par. So this was a major fight that came up. And Lakshmana at that time said to himself, he was annoyed because he saw that Rama was fighting there, and Ravana was going straight towards him, ignored Lakshmana as if he wasn't of any account. So Lakshmana stood in between, and he shot his arrows at Ravana. And Ravana didn't bother because it didn't matter to him at all. He was not afraid of Lakshmana. He passed him, and then he approached Rama, who was standing like a mountain, they say. The Valmiki Ramayana says he was standing like a mountain on the battlefield, not in the least bit disturbed. And they said that when these two came together, all of creation was seized with terror, because one looked like the god of retribution and the other looked like the god Yama, the god of death, between them both, Rama and Ravana. They were none seemed smaller than the other. And then they started sending arrows after arrows, steel arrows. And they sent first 20 arrows at each other, then 40, then 100, and then thousands of arrows. And they both were covered with arrows and bleeding very heavily. And then Ravana was so angry, he sent a big missile that was presided over by the demonic world. The entire force of the demons of the universe he sent against Rama. And it hit Rama. And Rama, though he was hit by it, he stood unmoved. He had pain, but he was standing there, they say, like the god of fire. Then Ravana is so angry because Rama hasn't fallen down, though he sent these arrows. So he aims again at Rama with another missile, which is covered by the mantra of Rudra, the god of destruction. And then when he did that, it pierced Rama in all his vital parts. But Rama didn't flinch. And then Lakshmana, who was very angry with Ravana for all this, what he did was he sent arrows at Ravana's chariot, and he brought down his flag, which is like an insult to any king who goes with the standard. So the thing was brought down, and he severed the head of Ravana's charioteer, which fell down. And meanwhile, Vibhishana, who was quite angry seeing all this, he jumped up and he killed all Ravana's horses, which were the finest that he could see. And jumping down from the chariot, because the charioteer had died and the horses had gone, then Ravana showed a violent rage against Vibhishana, because Vibhishana had come in between, you see. And then he flung a javelin at Vibhishana, which Lakshmana cut even before it reached Vibhishana, because the way Lakshmana thought was, Rama has granted protection to Vibhishana. And if Vibhishana is attacked, if Rama is not around there, it is my duty to go and protect Vibhishana. I have to do Rama's work. So he went and protected. And then Ravana was still more furious, and then he took another javelin and he threw it with a magic mystic mantra, and he flung it at Lakshmana, and it hit Lakshmana's chest and went down to the earth, pinning Lakshmana with that javelin. Now, Rama's eyes were dimmed with tears, so he couldn't look properly, but he quickly shook it off, and he called Sugriva and Hanuman, and he said, form a circle around Lakshmana so that he will not be attacked. Meanwhile, let me go and finish off this person. So these people stood around him, and Rama shot at Ravana. And when all this happened, Ravana started getting a bit nervous, because he knew now something was not going to be that easy. So Rama went round shooting such arrows at Ravana that he was getting unnerved. And the sound of the twanging of his bow and the arrows, they say, it struck terror in the whole of creation, because nobody knew what was happening. They didn't know how it was going to finish. And the whole world, you know how people are afraid of corona, and imagine that the whole world is going to dissolve. What sort of a terror people would have had. Then Rama spoke to his Sushena, who is the doctor there, and he said, somehow my limbs are failing. I'm not as strong as I was. That's because Lakshmana is lying. He said, the bow seems to be slipping from my hand. I'm sweating, that sort of thing. And he says, if anything happens to Rama, what is the point of my even coming into this war? What is the point of Sita? How will I face Sumitra, his mother? How will I face my mother, Kausalya? She'll say, how come you went with Lakshmana and you're returning without him? What will I say to Kaikeyi? And what will I say to Bharata and Shatrughna, who are so fond of him, and his wife? And he's so upset about the whole thing. But Sushena tells him, Sushena is a doctor, an Ayurvedic doctor of those days. He says to Rama, don't get upset. You don't have to get upset because I can see he has not returned his 5 Pancha Mahabhutas to nature. In other words, he's not dead. So that's how he says it, because that's how they see. Says, I feel the warmth, I see the slight subtle breath that is there, and the 5 elements have not been returned. The features have not grown dark, they've not become pale also. So all we need is to get Hanuman to go and bring the herbs again from the same mountain, and then he will be okay. Don't get demoralized thinking he's dead. He's not dead. I can see the lakshanas. That is, I can see I can read the signs. So Hanuman immediately, then he said, but you have to come back by morning. So Hanuman is thinking to himself, now what will I do? Because if I don't recognize the herbs, I'll come back without anything and Lakshmana could die by morning. So this is not in the Valmiki Ramayana, it's in another Ramayana. So he says, okay, I'll go there. And he goes. On the way, what happens is, Ravana sees him going. Ravana has gone back because his standard is stone and Rama is fighting. He too is very scared, demoralized, exhausted because they've both been fighting completely. And then Ravana sees from the window that Hanuman is flying. So he thinks to himself, now Hanuman will be up to something. So he calls the Surya Bhagavan, that is the sun. And he tells the sun, now it's night, I want you to rise immediately. So the sun says, hey, how can I rise immediately? I have to wait for 12 hours. And Ravana tells the sun, you are under my control. Because remember, Ravana has defeated all the Pancha Mahabhutas, he has defeated all the devatas, all the negative forces, positive forces, everything, and he's got a sovereignty and is just almost into infinity. It's a question of between the God and the devil, so to speak, if you want to use that term. So when the sun was rising, suddenly Hanuman turned back and he saw the sun was rising and it's only night. And the sun is his guru, you see. So he goes to the sun, God, and he says, why are you rising now? And the sun says, I can't do anything. Ravana has subjugated me. And he says, I must rise now immediately. So Hanuman tells him, you know, that Lakshmana is wounded and lying and I have to get these herbs and come. So why don't you hang around for a little while and then you can rise after I get the herbs. And the sun says, I'm scared because Ravana can destroy me. Now here is the disciple helping the guru out. Hanuman is helping Surya Bhagavan, who is his guru. He tells the Surya, the sun, come close to me, let me talk to you, I'll tell you a secret. And when the sun comes close to him, he picks up the sun and he puts it under his shoulder, armpit, in his armpit. And then as he's flying, there is a sage sitting on the side. And the sage tells him, where are you going, Hanuman? So Hanuman tells him, this has happened. So he says, why don't you go have a fresh bath and come back? And then you can rest a while and go. So Hanuman thinks, anyway, I have the sun with me, so let me go and rest a little while. So the sage tells him, no, now you go back Go and have a bath and come back. I'll keep your food ready for you. And what does this Hanuman do? He goes to have a bath and is caught by a crocodile. And when he turns round to kill the crocodile says, I'm just here to warn you because this person you thought was a hermit, the sage, he is not a sage. He is one of the Rakshasa relatives of Ravana, and he has told him to keep you here and I'm supposed to kill you. So he um, he says, I'll you this man is a fake rishi. You go and kill him, and then everything will be okay. And meanwhile, you hurt me by hitting me, and I will be liberated. So it's a crocodile. So this is, you see, the Swadhisthana Chakra, desire of Ravana trying to be fulfilled by a negative force that is dressing up as a um, holy person, and allowing the emotional area, that is a Swadhisthana, the desires, trying to kill Hanuman. Now Hanuman is a bhakta and he has no desires except the desire of the divine. So he is not going to get sidetracked. And so he goes back to the hermit and he catches him and he uh, nicely hits him. And I don't remember whether he died or he just falls. But anyway, he dashes him to the ground and all that. And then he flies with the sun on his armpit, goes to the mountain, picks up the mountain peaks. He doesn't wait this time to ask and look and all that. He just shakes it. All the birds and animals and the trees fall off in the way he's shaking it. Picks up the um, hill, the mountain, and with the sun under his arm, he comes flying back. Now, when he comes flying back, he goes over Ayodhya. Because from the Himalayas to, if you're going to Lanka, you got to cross Ayodhya. And while he is passing Ayodhya, he happens to fly over the umbrella, the royal umbrella that Bharata has kept over Rama's sandals, padukas. So he thinks, who's this who dares to cast a shadow over Rama's padukas? So he takes an arrow and he shoots Hanuman, and Hanuman falls down, hit on his foot, falls down with the mountain and the sun under his arm, muttering Rama, Rama. So immediately Bharata calls Shatrughna, they're all nearby. So he calls him and he says, this person, whoever it is, took the name of Rama. So let's revive him. It could be somebody who's important to Rama, and there's something shining under his armpit. I don't know what it is. So they both together come and revive Hanuman, and they ask him, who are you? And Hanuman tells them, listen, what you've done is such a wrongful act. You could have thought about it, because now that I'm down here, this is what is happening in Lanka. If I don't go before the sun rises, Lakshmana will die. So then this Bharata asks him then, who is this? What is this under your arm that is shining? Armpit. Then he says, oh, that is the sun. It was going to rise. I caught it and kept it here. Otherwise it will rise prematurely. So Bharata said, you're such an astonishing person. I haven't seen anyone like you. I think we will also come and fight. And he tells Shatrughna, prepare the armies. And Shatrughna gets the armies and all prepared. And Hanuman says, listen, Rama didn't tell me to come and bring you. You and Shatrughna have been kept here to guard Ayodhya. You are his representatives here. Now, if you come after me, God knows what will happen to Ayodhya. I can manage everything on my own because Lakshmana will come to life the minute I give these herbs. But how will I go up? Because my momentum is lost when you hit me on the foot and I came falling down. So Shatrughna says, no problem. And he puts an arrow beneath Hanuman's feet and he shoots him up. And Hanuman, as he goes up, he says, all these brothers are terrific. One person brings me down along with the mountain and the sun, and the other one is giving me the momentum with his arrow to fly on. I don't know which of the others, one is better than the other. I don't know who's the best among them. So he flies there and he lands. And here, one of the interpreters say that for Bharata there was no problem. Having brought the Paduka of Rama, he has already had darshan of Rama as the Parabrahman, the Supreme. That's why he asks for the sandals and gets it back. But all the other people had to wait 14 years in Ayodhya to get the darshan of Rama again. And this was partly because Sita blessed Bharata. She gave him Diksha without his knowing it. And the same way that she gave Diksha to Hanuman also, who was a Jnani, and there was no Bhakti element in his horoscope. But she looked at him, and when he said, I am Rama's messenger, she looked at him, gave him her Diksha by look. And that is one of the ways that a guru gives Diksha. Ramana Maharshi and people would do that. They wouldn't touch you, they wouldn't say anything, they would just look at you. If you have any doubts about it, clarify it with Willie. He's had such an experience. So he looks at him, and then Hanuman gets blessed just by that look with the element of bhakti. So instead of saying I am Rama's Dhuta, he says I am Rama Dasa, that I am his servant. So he goes, he's flying up, he lands before the sun rises because the sun is with him. And he goes there, and Sushena comes and takes the herbs, and then they, getting the smell of it itself, Lakshmana wakes up and the javelin falls off and is healthy and wounds are healed, fresh. And then Rama hugs Hanuman and he says, you have really been a friend beyond compare, he says. And then he says, but Hanuman, what is that shining under your armpit? Then Hanuman says, oh, I forgot. That is the sun god who was getting ready to rise, and I picked him up and put him under my armpit. So Rama says, my goodness, that is my forefather, because he is in the solar dynasty, you see. So he says, let him go. And when the sun is allowed to go, Rama prostrates before him because he is one of his forefathers. So having done that, now Ravana, the monkeys are very happy and they raise such cries. And Ravana realizes something has happened because now he knows there's something different about these brothers. They're not just ordinary warriors. They're not just ordinary heroic warriors also. There's something more. So back he comes, getting another chariot because that chariot was cut down, you see. So he gets another chariot and he comes back, and Hanuman is carrying Rama, and Ravana is coming in the chariot, and the gods are talking among themselves. They say this is not a very fair fight because Ravana has a chariot and armor, missiles in the chariot, a charioteer, fresh horses. Something has to be done to equip Rama as well. So they speak to Indra. Indra is the illumined mind, if you remember. And Indra sends his charioteer with the chariot to Rama. And he says, go and tell Rama I've sent the chariot. And Matali, that's the name of the charioteer, he comes and tells Rama, please take your seat. This is what the gods say, that you have to be helped like this. So what did Rama do? Any guess? No? What would you do if somebody came and gave you a car and the keys? Get into it and drive, right? What Rama did is he went 3 times around the chariot and bowed to it. And then he got into the chariot. That is to show that Rama saw that everything had life, everything was the supreme absolute. This is what Adhyatma Ramayana says. That is, Rama as a avatar had this vision of everything being the Parabrahman. And as a man, he knew he had to kill Ravana. It was something that he could not prevent because Ravana had to go back for the second time because he promised him. So he sees a chariot as a being with life and not just an object to get into and go. So that is why they do this puja when you buy a new car. We think we are doing the puja to the car. It is to the divine which is in that car as an inert design. So then Rama climbs the chariot, and then Ravana is still showering arrows, and Rama has got 1,000 arrows stuck to him. And then Ravana was so mad about it, he sent a single arrow, and then he tore the standard of the flag of Indra's chariot. But that didn't disturb Rama. He continued fighting because it didn't bother him at all. So, however, he was very, very fierce with rage because he was thinking to himself, Rama, that here I am. Rama is known as a person with one, that is, one arrow, it would finish the job for which it was. A word he gives, it would never fail, and one wife. So, in those days when kings had many, many alliances, especially for um, um, political purposes and things, Rama didn't need also other alliances because he was in his own way, he was strong enough to handle everything. So, Rama was looking very angry, and Ravana was looking at him. And suddenly, Ravana started feeling a bit demoralized. He really couldn't handle it. But still, he sent a javelin at Rama. And Rama, who is angry with Ravana, comes to him, and then he tells Ravana, he says, "You are a coward. You thought you were a hero just because you came and took Sita away, the princess of Mithila. But how did you take her away? You came when I was not there and stole her away like a coward because you couldn't face me in battle. Then you knocked Lakshmana over and you thought you were so wonderful and you are a coward." He says, "You think to yourself that I am a hero." So he says that 3-4 times, Shuro aham iti. You think you're a hero. You think I am a hero. You think I am a hero. So he almost like provokes him by saying, each time you thought you were a hero, you're such a shameless person because even in your laws, nobody carries away another man's wife who is unwilling. Because the Rakshasas have a marriage where they can carry away somebody, but not someone's wife. So he says, you kept thinking I'm a hero, and you didn't feel the least bit ashamed, even though you saw your brothers Kara and Dushana being killed. You saw the whole place being killed, your sons and your other relatives, your brothers, everybody lying dead, and nothing stopped you from continuing. He said, "You're not a hero, you're just a coward," he says. Now, Ravana started feeling a bit bewildered because he didn't quite know what to do because nobody had ever spoken to him like this, also standing so uh, unafraid. So he suddenly started thinking to himself, will I be able to fight with this person, Rama? And the bow kept slipping from his own hand. The arrows wouldn't stay in his hand. And he looked very weak, as if he was going to die any minute. Seeing this, his charioteer took him away from the battlefield to a little separate place. And when Ravana came to, when he got a little revived, he was angry with the charioteer. He said, "What did you do? You made me, you humiliated me by taking me off the battlefield. Like any other coward, exactly like Rama's words, you took me away as if I couldn't stand up and fight with him. Are you in cohorts with the enemy? Are you in collusion with the enemy? Or were you afraid that if I die, who will take care of you? So you are working for the opposite side? Or have you forgotten that I have looked after you and your family all these years?" And then and he said, by the time you come back, I'll see that you're killed, he says. So the charioteer tells him, he says, that this is how Valmiki gives you the culture of those days. Even in war, they had certain norms. He said, I was neither afraid nor was I perplexed, the charioteer says. Nor was I won over by the enemies. Nor was I disloyal or negligent. Nor have I forgotten what you have done for me all these years. I did something which you didn't approve of. That I agree. He says, but I did it because I loved you. I didn't want you to cut a sorry face. You didn't look as if you could stand up and fight. You were looking weak. You were almost semi-conscious. And I saw your exhaustion because you had such a strenuous war. And you didn't look as if you could stand up and fight. And then my chariot horses also were very tired. They too needed refreshing. I couldn't go on and on like that. So he said, I thought I'll just take you and the horses to a side so that both of you could be revived. And now that you're a bit revived, whatever you say, I'll do. You tell me what to do, I'll obey you. So Ravana was so overwhelmed by the loyalty of the charioteer. Immediately he took off a bangle with precious stones on his hand and he gave it to the charioteer and he says, let's go back to the war. You see how impulsive the Rajas is. A Rajasic quality. He may be evil because he has ambition, he has lust for the girl, he has a sense of pride and vanity. All that is the Rajasic element. But the Rajasic element, when it's provoked, is also very impulsive. The minute the charioteer does that, he doesn't even wait to go home, takes off his precious bangle, gives it to him and says, okay, now I understand, let's go back to fight. And that is that impetuosity and impulsiveness that brings down a Rajasic person, Guna. Because you got to sit and think about what you're going to do next. A Sattvic person will look at the whole thing and decide, should I go ahead and do this or shall I wait? Is this the moment to intervene or not? It has to be in line with the divine will, not because I am reacting. So he didn't have that. And in the meantime, what was Rama doing? Rama was standing there very thoughtful because he was wondering to himself, what is happening? Here is Ravana, he came, he was fighting, and suddenly he pushes off. I don't know whether he's coming back or he's not coming back. And he doesn't want to hang on and wait again and fight another day. He wants to finish off the job once and for all. So while he's thinking, Agastya Rishi comes to him. Agastya is a person that he met when he was in the forest of Dandakaranya, when he went on exile. And Agastya had given him a javelin and a sacred arrow given by Indra. So what Agastya does is, he comes to him and he says, you are actually the Parabrahman. That is, you are the Supreme. Now I want to tell you this also. Everybody is the Supreme Divine. We are all around here struggling the way we are doing because we don't recognize it. Because Mahamaya has put a veil over our eyes and we see ourselves only as the physical body. physical mind with all its drawbacks and maybe a few strengths. And the mind, we associate that mind with the mind of somebody else. It's a social conditioning, it's a cultural conditioning. We can't imagine that because we've been told God is up high there and uh, we've been taught to be humble, you see. So people say, I can never reach that, Rama can do it. But what they are trying to say is everyone is an incarnation in that sense. Not the true incarnation comes without any karma, he comes by choice. The rest of us who are still a part of the divine come because we make a mess and we come back to clean up the mess. And in cleaning up one mess, we make another, then we come to clean that up. And so they say that the mother, Mahamaya, she puts us in different situations so that you can see how to clean up many messes. Because that is how what the Supreme does. And in the process, you raise your wisdom. So then he tells him that the only person you can now pray to, meditate upon, and invoke the energies of is Surya. Now, this Surya is not the sun that we see up in the sky, though they will show you pictures of that in YouTubes and things. This is the Surya, that is the essence of the Parabrahman, the essence of the divine, the luminosity of the divine light. So he says, invoke the divine light. Because why light? Because when the divine is without its Shakti, it is pure consciousness and it's not acting at all. So you have to invoke the Shakti of the divine consciousness. So he calls him Aditya. He says, pray to Aditya. This is the Aditya Hridayam which some of you have been chanting. And if you'd like to later on exchange things among yourselves, even with me if you like, I've heard of one or two very beautiful things happening to people. So he says that essence is what you are invoking of the Supreme Being, and that essence is Shiva, it is Brahma, it is Yama, it is the Subramanya, it is all the entire universe. He names all this, and this is the contents of the Aditya Hridayam. Why Aditya means he is the son of Aditi. So he's called Aditya. What does it mean to be son of Aditi? He is the son of Bhuvaneshwari or space. The divine Shakti comes out as time, and within time things happen. But where does it happen? It happens in space. And Bhuvaneshwari or Aditi is the name, the Vedic name for space, the goddess of space. And space is not just a thing as we think. Space is a living consciousness giving place for the luminosity of the divine to create and manifest different universes in its arms, so to speak. So he calls him Aditya, and he says Aditya Hridayam. Hridayam means the heart of Aditya, the heart of the son of the mother of space. She is the Mahamaya. Bhuvaneshwari is the Mahamaya. Praying to her child, or in other words, invoke that energy into yourself, and then it will become like your child too. In other words, he's saying you are the Paramatma. So actually, when you have an Ishta Devata and you are proceeding in Upasana, the Ishta Devata to start with is your imagination, visualization. Then later it becomes a real being of light within you as you go up in Upasana. So at that time, the sadhaka is called the mother or the father of the divine. So divine is called Bala. Bala means a child. Infant Jesus, infant Krishna, Bala Krishna, infant Subramanya, Bala Subramanya, Bala Tripura Sundari. That is, you haven't got the whole in you as yet. You're still on the process. So you have been able to, with your will force, which is in your Agnya Chakra, and with the tremendous unconscious emotions, you have been able to bring out your own form. This Ishta Devata is your own form of light, which is sitting in that car that you call the physical body. We don't see it normally because it's not perceivable by the senses, indriyas, not perceivable by the mind. You have to move into another dimension of consciousness to see that light. And that light is within every person. That is the light of the divine. It is a reality, it's not a concept. I remember when Swami Satyananda at one time he was looking at a vast audience of people for one of the Chandi Yajnas, I think, and he said, if only you could see yourselves as I see you. He said, not just you, I see you as light, and I see the mic. Even the mic is a living being, it's full of light. But you don't see it that way, he said. Okay, so when you move into another dimension, you do have that feeling of reality, seeing light, which is what Arjuna saw when he tells Krishna, show me your form. And Krishna appears as brilliant light, and all the universe is with him. And Arjuna said, for God's sake, take it away, take it away. I can't stand the light. Because it's supposed to be like 10,000 brilliant suns. That's how they describe it, the Jivatma in the Anahata Chakra. But Krishna's mother, she asked him, open your mouth. They say, you have eaten mud. I want to see. He said, no, I never ate mud. She says, open your mouth. And she looks into his mouth and she sees his entire universe, including herself and him. And in that shock, he throws that Shakti of Bhuvaneshwari, that is the Maya Shakti, and makes her forget what she has seen. She did not faint or get scared like Arjuna did. Why? Because she was already mature, and Arjuna was not quite so mature. On top of that, she was a mother. And mothers have the guts to face anything for the children. So when I say mother, a man can also be a mother. It's not a gender difference, but the quality of mothering. You can put your life at danger to save the child. And who's the child here? The Bala Rama, Bala Surya, Bala Subramanya, Bala Krishna. The child that you have brought out from the hidden body and mind Pancha Mahabhutas. So seeing that, he says, when you do that, you will have that same power. You don't have it now because Mahamaya has put this veil over your eyes. So that one whole chapter is given to the Aditya Hridayam. The Valmiki will describe it, what you are reading. And hearing this, and Valmiki, not Valmiki, Agastya, but Valmiki is the one narrating it. And Agastya will say, worship the Lord of the universe with a concentrated mind. Don't think about Ravana, don't think about the war, don't think of your weapons, don't think about Sita, what you're doing. Simply meditate on that Supreme Almighty. He knows what is needed to be done. And so he does this, he meditates on this Surya Bhagavan, and he repeats the Aditya Hridayam there. So here it's like the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is given to Arjuna in a minute. The conversation is recorded by Vyasa. The same way, Agastya just looks at him and gives him the power of the Aditya Hridayam. So he doesn't need to say it all together. It's like Swami Satyananda said, Swami Shivananda taught him the whole of the Kriya Yoga within 2 minutes or something. So he didn't have to go through the techniques and the asanas and the pranayama and things. This is the Diksha that is given by certain gurus, most of them were tantric gurus. This is a form of tantra And this is what Swami Satyananda meant when he said the end of yoga is the beginning of Tantra. You have to reach a certain level when these things are given to you, and you have to be able to receive it without burning yourself. So immediately he felt that the Surya Bhagwan, who was also standing there with the other gods, tells Rama, I'm in you now, take your bow and fight, you'll win. So, meanwhile, the Surya Bhagavan, the Ravana is coming with his charioteer, and Matali, that is Rama's charioteer sent by Indra, also is coming, and they are coming towards each other like two universes colliding. That's the way they come. And Rama says to his charioteer, he says, from the way um, Ravana is darting to and fro in the chariot, he's not steady, he says. This is how they find out. He says, he's not steady. It looks like his heart has been set upon destroying himself. He's just come in, but he's not focused. So he says, take care and go slowly towards the enemy's chariot. I want to destroy it completely. So he tells Matali, have a steady vision, don't be confused, just go feeling relaxed and go towards the chariot. I'll do the rest of it. And then they go, and immediately what happens is when they are confronting each other, and they talk about various ways of driving a chariot. They'll dart towards each other, then they'll go in circles, and they'll retreat, and they'll go forward. And Ravana's charioteer also at that time tells him, I didn't just walk away taking you away, but it is a charioteer's duty, dharma, to see the welfare of his master. Is he looking weak? Is he looking tired? Should I go now? Should I go later? I have to assess all this. I have to assess the horses. I have to assess the way one goes forwards, backwards, looking at the upper antagonist's skill sets. All that is a duty. I'm not just driving a chariot, he says. So you're already programmed to listen to that part of it. And suddenly, when they confront each other, all sorts of negative portents come from the heavens. That is, the blood falls on Ravana's chariot. The jackals are howling. The vultures are going round and round. All these are negative omens. And where Rama is concerned, he is seeing all the positive omens. That means that he is going to be able to win the war. So that gives him a little more morale. Already he is happy. And then Ravana comes and pierces the horses of Rama's chariot. But Rama's chariot was a divine chariot. So the horses were not bothered about it. They continued going, and these arrows didn't touch them. And then Ravana shot at Rama's charioteer, but charioteer was also a divine charioteer. So he too was not bothered. He just continued going. And they both furiously attacked each other because they were determined one or the other will go. And Rama tells Lakshmana also that today it's do or die. Either Ravana or I. One of us are going to die today. We've got to see how the war turns. But it is a fight to the finish now. So then they both fight, and the arrows pierce the charioteer of Rama also. And the gods and the rishis, all the positive spiritual energies in the universe were all crowded because they wanted to see what is happening, because all their destinies will depend on this, as to whether the positive or the negative force wins. And then Rama then sends a particular arrow which was sent with the mystic mantra of Rudra. It goes and Ravana is able to break it. So Rama is thinking to himself, how is it that I, who have defeated everyone in the universe, that way Rama, as Parabrahman, he says, uh, how is it that Ravana is able to withstand it? That means how superior he must be. He's looking on him um, with a joyful countenance, like, a warrior can appreciate another warrior with that sense. So you can see that here the Lord is becoming soft and starting to smile at his adversary, because he remembers that he's not there to destroy him but to destroy that demonic body and liberate him from this lifetime of hatred. So when the Lord looks with grace, he might take away your something dear to you. He might take away your wealth. He might take away your even your life at times. But he's doing it not because he's punishing you, but because he is eager to have you back with him. So that is what Rama does. And when he cuts off a head of Ravana, and then the head appears again. Then he cuts it off again, it appears again, because he's got this boon that he'll always have his heads. And from Valmiki's Ramayana, it seems that he didn't have 10 heads in the war, he had just one, which contained all the 10 ingredients. So it's kept on falling. And then Vibhishana tells him, you got to hit him at his navel, Nabhi Chakra, Manipur Chakra. That's where his prana is. Anywhere else it won't work. So Rama hits him on the navel and Ravana falls down. And Ravana falls down saying what? Any guess? He says Rama, Rama and falls down. Because when the soul is leaving the body, the Mahabhutas have gone, the elements have gone, but the soul recognizes its source, the divine. And its life as this monster is over. So he then says Rama, Rama, and then immediately all the other Rakshasas, some of them who were left behind, they ran away because they knew now nothing would help. And something I wanted to tell you. Yeah. And Ravana falls down, and there's much happiness among the monkeys and Lakshmana and the gods. They're very happy this has happened, and the gods start showering flowers on Rama, and all of them still covered with blood, but send all these good things to Rama. Now then what happens is, we haven't finished this bit. They say, one of the commentators says that Shuka Brahman was there. Shuka Brahman was the person who narrated the Mahabharata to Parikshit, who was Arjuna's grandson, whom Krishna saved, the only one who was left alive. So he, at one time, he had in his annoyance picked up a dead serpent and put it on a rishi's, a silent meditating sage's neck. So the sage, who is non-violent, doesn't say anything, but the sage's son comes and he feels very hurt that his father was insulted. So he curses Parikshit that you will die in 7 days bitten by a snake. Now Parikshit knows he's going to die. So he calls all the holy people there and he says, I know I'm going to die in 7 days. Tell me, what can I do to get liberation? He didn't say, how do I escape? Then each one says, you've got to give so much dan, that is, charity. But he says, you've already given so much You have to do so much meditation. You don't have time. It's only 7 days. Then Shuka Brahman, who is Vyasa's son, who because of whom the entire Bhagavatam was written. He comes there, and he says also that at one time, when the coronation of Yudhishthira happened, after the war, the Pandava king, they say that if a person is fed, a hungry person is fed, a certain bell would ring. And here, when they were sitting there at that havan, a bell kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing without stopping. So Yudhishthira asks Krishna, why is that bell ringing like that? So he says, Shuka Brahman. Shuka Brahman was an already enlightened, liberated soul. That's why he was called Brahman. That is, he was with the Supreme. He was called Shuka because he had a face like a parrot. So he says Shuka Brahman, when he eats one morsel, it is as if the entire universe has eaten it, because he's one with the Supreme. So he says Shuka Brahman must have eaten something. That's why it's ringing and ringing for every being that is around. And because that Shuka Brahman had taken a morsel from the Pandavas at that time and eaten it, he was obligated to sit with Parikshit for 7 days and fast and tell him the whole story of the Bhagavatam. So that is the way it is. And Lakshmana looks at Ravana's body and he says, look, there isn't even a square inch where an arrow hasn't pierced and blood is not coming. What a famous warrior he was. And it's like every point on his body, blood is rushing out. And Rama tells him, that is not my arrow that is bleeding. Those are his tears for each son that died on his behalf. Putra Shokam. That's why it is. Because so many sons died. And then he asks Vibhishana. Rama tells Vibhishana, now go and do the rituals for the dead, because you are the closest. And Vibhishana says, no, I won't do it for him. He was such an evil person. And Rama says to him, all evil and good and everything is finished when the body dies, because that is a karma of that body. He is not that body anymore. So either you do it or I will do it, Rama says. So Vibhishana rushes to do the ceremonies for Ravana, and Rama sends Hanuman. Rama asks Vibhishana, after crowning Vibhishana, he asks Vibhishana, can I send Hanuman to go and fetch Sita? Because now Vibhishana is the king. That was the speciality of Rama. He always followed protocol in that sense. He didn't think, anyway, I've got it, let me go in and get her. He said, ask Hanuman to bring her. And when Hanuman goes, he tells him, let her have a good bath, wear fresh clothes and flowers in her hair, and come bring her like that. Don't bring her with the way she's been sitting in the past few months. And here Hanuman is thinking to himself, he says, aha. So even Rama does not want to look at a wife who is soiled and things like that. He wants to see her looking nice and fresh and beautiful. He's thinking. And Rama, knowing what he's thinking, smiles at him and he says, Hanuman, you know why I said it? Because Sita has been sitting there and crying and being miserable. And that has brought, she has, in her own way, she's like Kali. She has brought death to that entire Sri Lanka. Now that Vibhishana, my bhakta, is going to be the king, I cannot give him a kingdom that is broken down and ruined. I have to give him a prosperous kingdom. So she is Lakshmi, Mahalakshmi. So I say, bring her with well clothed and looking auspicious, so that as she walks through Lanka and comes, she will spread that prosperity and sacredness there. So when I give it to that kingdom to Vibhishana, I'll be giving him a prosperous and a positive kingdom and not a negative place. So then Hanuman goes to Sita and he tells Sita, Rama has won the war and he wants you to come, and this is what it is. And um, Sita tells Hanuman, she says, I don't know how to repay you for everything that you've done. So he says, then give me one boon, one wish, fulfill it for me. So she says, you ask whatever you want. So he said, I'd like to tear up all these demonesses who were surrounding you and chew them up and break their bones and throw them around. And I'm laughing because it sounds like my grandson. He, he was cutting a mango the other day and he said, I'm going to hide a knife in this. So if some robber or somebody comes for that mango, I'll tell him, wait, let me eat the mango and comb my hair. Oh, the knife was in the comb. Let me comb my hair and then I'll fight with you. So when the robber comes, I'll take out the knife and I'll kill him and I'll throw him out, break his bones. So this reminded me of that. So anyway, so what happened is when she says that, um, she says to Hanuman, she says, Na kaschit na aparadhyati. Now, you know, in the Upanishads, the gurus give disciples certain Mahavakyas, they are called, sentences which they should meditate upon. They are called the Mahavakyas, the great words. For example, Tattvamasi, you are that, or Prajnanam Brahma, that is, you are consciousness. Consciousness is Brahman. Like that, there will be certain words, there are 5 of them, 4 or 5 of them in the Upanishads, that when a person takes sannyas, the guru will tell him this, and this is what he is supposed to meditate upon. That's all his sadhana is. But he has to live his life trying to find the real meaning and realize it in himself. So they say because Sita is the first avatar of Mahalakshmi that came as a human being. Because when he comes as Matsya, as the in the 10 avatars, when Paramatma comes as the Matsya Kurma, that is as the fish, as the tortoise, as Narsimha, the lion-faced god, all that time his Shakti was in himself. She didn't come along with him. The Rama avatar was the first time when Shakti came along with him. So when she says the first statement that is worth contemplating on, that she says, Na kaschit na aparadhyati. That is, there is nobody, that is nothing in manifestation that does not make a mistake. Nobody is perfect. That's what she's saying. So he confronts her. He says, okay, then what do you say about Rama? Why do you say that if nobody is perfect, how about Rama? What is his imperfection? And she says that when Shurpanakha came to him, she was going by herself. He turned to her and he said, who are you, O beautiful woman? Who are your parents? Now it was not Rama's business to find out who some pretty girl was who was going along. He didn't mean it like that, but she says, I mean, these are the things, and this is how Valmiki will put into the Shastra certain things which give you an indication of the value systems of those days. You don't harass the woman. Somebody going around there, you mind your own business. You know, that sort of thing. Then he says, what happened? What about Lakshmana? What did he do? So he says, when I told Lakshmana to go immediately, we heard the deer. He didn't go immediately. He stood and had an argument with me. That was his mistake. So he said, then what about you? What did you do? So she said, I spoke such harsh and cruel words to Lakshmana, who was a great devotee of Lord Rama, Bhakta. And if you say harsh words to a Bhakta, you've got to pay a price. And that is why I had to come and stay here for so many months and be kidnapped. I orchestrated the whole thing, she says. Because she's Shakti. And then he says, and she says, one of the demonesses, Rakshashis, befriended me and took care of me. Because of her, I have to let all of them go because they were only obeying their king. They couldn't have got away. That was their duty. They had to follow what the king said. King said, guard her. They guarded me. They didn't do it because they hated me. So that is the message that Sita says. And then the women take Sita inside and then they give her a nice good tub bath with rose oil and all that sort of stuff, and deck her in beautiful ornaments and clothes and flowers, and then they take her in a palanquin to Rama. And along the way, the monkeys who have never seen her, you see, because they've come just taking Rama's word, they are all hustling and pushing to see her sitting in the palanquin. And Vibhishana's guards lathi charge them. You know what's lathi charge? You have that in US. They take these sticks and hit them so they'll go away. So Rama sees that and he says to Vibhishana, tell them to stop hitting the monkeys. They have given up everything, their families, their um, prosperity, everything, and they've come all the way just for her sake to help her back. They are her children and they have earned the right to see her face. Let her face not be covered. Let her come out and walk among the monkeys so they can see her. She is their mother. Now, that, according to certain mystical commentators, means that he is saying that they have, with the sacrifice and the Guru Bhakti that they have done, they have earned the right to look at Sri Vidya. Sri Vidya is the Tripura Sundaris, the Devis, the mother goddess, her upasana to reach her, because through her you go to the divine. She is Prakriti. So he says that the monkeys have earned the right to see her face. Remove the veil from her face so they see her. So he is not talking of the woman there, he is talking of that they have earned the right to be initiated into the Sri Vidya Upasana. And then she comes walking to Rama and she sees him and she's very happy to see him. We'll end here because it's a good note. And next time we'll continue the rest of it, and maybe the next time we might finish or the time after that. So we'll finish the Ramayana. I think we are on time. No, 11:44. You've got 13 minutes. You want to ask questions, you can. If you don't want, yeah.
Auntie, I have a question. Not to sound arrogant or anything, I'm just curious. Rama shows a lot of human qualities, right? I mean, characteristics. Like even right now, like he spoke to Surpanakhi and he said, "Who are you, beautiful women?" and all that. Lot of characteristics are very human. So, what
Yes.
is it that we? What about him is making us pray to him? We consider him as God. What is there about Rama? Because he was a Kshatriya, he went and he waged war, got back his wife, and all those things. And he had a lot of support system along with that. But what about himself is there that we pray to him, that he becomes God?
Well, if I understood the question, because you were a little faint, you were talking about the human mistakes that Rama made, or they said that he made, and where does it stand in the overview of the whole thing. Now, if you
Oh,
go into the Adhyatma Ramayana later, you will find that everybody is designed to be a particular way. That is their Swadharma. Even though he was an avatar, his Shakti was Sita. And Sita was the cosmic mother. She was the one who acts, he just follows. So she designed him to be a human being till the very end almost, where though you had flashes of his divinity seen here and there, to live a life of dharma so that other human beings could emulate him. Because this is also part of any shastra. So these were the little ways, values of society that they would put into it to give you a feeling of, well, if he can make a mistake, so can I. And if it's okay, then it's okay for me also to make a mistake. All I need is to pull up my bootlaces and carry on. You don't have to be sitting down feeling guilty and miserable and making that's a mistake. You just realize you made a mistake like anybody else. Your gods equally make mistakes when they take human form. So you don't judge yourself too badly. That is one reason. But then they won't see him having a jolly good time with Shurpanaka. It's just to give a little bit of a view into the culture of that time. So that's how they make it. They make him very human because they say he followed dharma. Dharma in the sense that usually when there is a dangerous situation, we look at the people in our house first. You have a child, you protect the child. COVID, like you're not going to drop your child, go to the neighbor's house and protect their child. Then you go to your neighborhood, and then you go to the district or the county. Then you go to the larger area. Then you say, let's protect the United States. We won't have people coming in at any time. And so does India. Every country does that. That is the normal behavior. Now, what they are saying is Rama put his family last. The ones he loved were always last. He was setting an example for all statesmen, politicians, kings of that time, that you have to take into, you are the father or mother of your subjects. It is your responsibility to take their desires, their shortcomings, their failures, their strengths into account and guide them along the way and help them reach a higher level. And for this, you can sacrifice your personal life, which is why later you will see he did give up Sita at certain time, and then he gave up Lakshmana. And though he grieved over it, it was an example he was setting. And even when Bharata came and asked him to come back, and the rishis also said to him that it's okay, your father is dead, now we can go by it. Rama said no, because for two reasons. One reason was that you can't do something wrong and call it right because it's convenient to everybody else, to everyone there. You have to follow the right conduct, the dharma. And second thing is, Mahamaya or Sita had written this, he set him up for a certain design. He has to move along that way. He has to be a dharma vigraha. And because it was so difficult in Rama's time, Krishna Avatara came, and it was so much more mixed in the way that in Rama's time, somebody who did bad was bad, somebody who did was good. It was very straight-laced. But then as civilization moved on and people started getting their own desires and things, a good man could have a bad quality, a bad man could have a good quality, and only a Krishna who saw the whole would know what to do when, and he would advise Arjuna about it. So when you saw something as wrong, how could Krishna have done that? And you went back to the totality of the thing, you know, oh, so this is why he did it. So moving from being a human being, a perfect human being, dharmic human being, which Rama laid the foundation because he was called Taraka Rama. He helps you cross the ocean of materialism, samsara, sagara. to a higher consciousness. So he's called Taraka, the boat that takes you across. So he moved around everywhere. He broke the barriers of caste, creed, religion of those days, because he hugged Guha, who was a tribal, and then he gave moksha to a bird. He gave moksha to many monkeys. He gave moksha to the demons by helping them. So his dharma was very pure. He didn't kill anybody because he hated them. He did it to bring them back to a liberated level. Whereas Krishna was very mischievous. He would look at the whole thing and he'll get somebody else to do his work for him. So they're very different in character. So every time will bring an avatar the way those times need him to come. God comes in a form that we need, and when he comes, it will be in the form that we need, not according to some old cultural background.
Thank you, Auntie.
Hmm?
Thank you.
Auntie, I also have a question.
Yeah.
When we were talking about in this class today, you were telling me that Rama's forefather is the sun god, and Ravana's son is sun god. So I don't know how this whole thing is.
Rama's
Rama's forefather is the
yeah,
sun god,
sun god, right?
and Ravana's son is sun god.
No,
No,
no.
Ra.
Ravana's son was never sun god. His son was Indrajit.
Uh-huh.
Indrajit was a person who defeated Indra. So he's called Indrajit. He had nothing to do with the sun.
Oh.
Ravana's grandfather was a mind-born son of Brahma, and his father was a Brahmana, a Brahmin sage.
Mm.
So not the sun.
Not the sun.
No, no.
Thanks, Auntie.
Welcome.
Mm.
Okay. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Tremendous work out there, I hear. Spiritual warriors, these girls are. I'm so impressed with all of you. I'm so proud of all of you. Hey, Tom, let's put you back here. So, Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Swamiji.
you. Thank you.